I think I need to change my spot. Is it over here? No bueno. The light is very dark. Not dark, but it's not so sunny and bright. I always forget that I'm supposed to face the light. Okay, I gotta redirect my AC. Hold on. The weather has been insane. And you know, it's funny that I just finished getting my classes homework. You know, when you finish the class is one thing, then I have to, let's take that out. I have to send them the notes and any homework. So, you know, there's a little bit more work involved. Hola, Candace, is that Auntie? No, that's Eve has many faces. When Singerful. Oh, that's interesting. Hola, ¿cómo estás? When Singerful. Wow. Hi, everyone. So let's see. I really didn't get a chance to do much research. You know, I went out this morning, went to the store, then I had two classes back to back. So we're going to chat about anything that's on your mind. I reposted the co-living. What do we call it? It was like a gathering, I guess, talking about co-living. If you didn't get a chance, go ahead and look at that. And we talked about the origin of co-living, that it really started in the Netherlands. I forgot what the year was. And this architect had been traveling through Europe. I forgot his name too, but it's in the video. And he was like, wow, this is interesting, you know, because we never had that in the States. And when he came back with him and his wife, they kind of researched the concept more, the concept of community, of shared spaces. And as an architect, he started creating blueprints for the same type of living spaces where people could live together in community, something that, boy oh boy, that we need, right? Because, you know, America as a society had kind of moved away from a community model to a more self focused model. And of course, if you talk to sociologists, they will tell you that it hadn't done us well because no man is an island, and men generally we need community. We need people around us. And of course, women, you know, are, because we're just such emotional human being, we're always looking to connect for connections. And that's why single women retiring abroad is here. We're bringing women who are in a strange country alone together to create community. So if you listen to my videos, I always say we are a group of sassy older women who have made a conscious decision to retire abroad, create community, while we reinvent ourselves, because you need community wherever you are. And of course, also, hola, hey, nice speak. How are you, my friend? You know, even in society where we come from, again, we've kind of moved away from the community. Remember that it takes a village concept that we talked about all the time. I remember when I was growing up, I can see it like it was yesterday. In my neighborhood, my little street, wherever I lived, my mother worked. And every woman, every mother on that street was my mother. And I'm sure you can relate to that. So we didn't misbehave because mom was at work, because sister, the neighbor, everybody's watching. And if I did something, they're already corrected. They already provided justice or correction, whether it's a couple of slaps, not with the hand, but, with the belt or something, if it needed. And then when mom got home and they told her, well, guess what? I got another one. So the community concept of your children, everybody has a stake in it to see them grow up as decent human being. And even in the, I grew up in the Caribbean. This is the way I grew up. My mom worked. She was a single mom, so she was gone a lot. But we had help at home, so they took care of us. And every single neighbor watched over us. So we didn't dare misbehave. And I remember, get up, especially during summer vacation, we get up in the morning, we ate something real quick, and I was in those streets all day. We came back to eat lunch and we were out again, just playing, just having fun. And those times, I'm so grateful because right now, we can't let our kids out there the way we used to. You don't know, this nasty pedophile is looking at your kid. We've lost that. When I was growing up in the village, my mother never worried about somebody messing with me, you know, because all the mothers were watching each other's kids and we were at each other's houses. When my kids were growing up, we didn't allow kids to go spend the night. You don't know whose home these kids are going into. And some of these parents are playing nasty, and you're gonna have to watch over your kids. And even to this day, we tell people, know where your kids are going, know who they're seeing. My kids used to say, Mom, can I spend the night with so and so? And I'm like, who's that? Right? And it was like, oh, you see her mom in the car line. That doesn't mean I know her. You know my answer to that. So I had to the point where the kids know, oh, my mom would never go for that. Yeah, we had some absolutes. We do not spend the night at places of people we didn't know. It doesn't work. And even then, they could still get to your kids. This is crazy. People are sick. Even here, they're getting them, they're always messing with their nieces. And it's just, I don't get it. I don't get it because I wasn't raised like that, right? Okay. So when the guy came back from the States, and again, you can find his name in that video that I did previously, and I posted it. I think it went out again this morning at 8 o'clock. It says co-living or co-housing, which one you prefer, something like that. So go ahead and look at that. And that could be a video that you can refer to over and over, right? Because the differences are very interesting. And depending on where you are, it could be one or the other. And I think a lot of us would prefer the co-housing because we'll talk about that in a second. So when he came home, the architect, he's from California, he started, creating a blueprint for that model of living in community where you have shared goals and shared, hola, Lynette, shared, vision for what you want your community to be. I think it's commendable to say that I'm going to live on a street in a compound where we are all committed to this model of living, not even aging. This is not for old people, right? So you have families, and he was enthralled when he saw how people were living in the Netherlands. They had like maybe a two-story building, everybody knew each other. They would come out in the afternoon, sit in the yard, have fun. The kids are playing. Now, again, just like we're going to be doing for our older folks, people have to be vetted, right? You have got to know who's coming into your community. And I think it is a risk for anyone considering co-living or co-housing. Because let me tell you, I don't have to tell you, that. Seeing somebody that you go to lunch with and you play pickleball or pack whatever ball you guys play. You walk together, you serve on committees together, you volunteer together. Does not mean you know that person. Just like when you meet somebody, a partner, potential partner, and of course, when they're trying to reel you in, they say all the things you want to hear. They talk about the things they know that you like. They look good, they smell good, but you don't really know that person until you're living with that person day in and day out. And that's why I say in my little mind that that's one of the reasons people who work together many times end up together. Because when you're working with someone 8, 9, 10 hours a day, I mean, you're going to get to know that person. I mean, they would have to be really guarded to not let something slip out. You want to see that person when they're happy. You want to see them when they're unhappy. You want to see them when things don't go well. How do they handle that? You want to see them when they're sick, when they're well. Are they a whiner? That would be a problem for me. So you got to vet these people. So their communities, I'm not saying it was perfect, and I don't have any information that everything was hunky dory, that it worked, but it became a very attractive model of life living for people in those communities. Now, whether they had age restrictions, I don't know, but I know it was a mixture of different types of families. But it must have worked because then there was more need for him to do more. That guy, he's still alive and he's still living in that community in California. But one of some of the reasons I think that model is very attractive to people, because not just because people like me have read studies that show that isolation is a major risk factor for death and depression and dementia and all of it, and especially as you age. But let's assume these are younger communities, right, with children, and that you have vetted your co-housers or your neighbors, that if you said, oh my gosh, my daughter is not doing real well and I have to go to work, and some grandma in that community will say, they already know, she's like, don't worry, you go ahead, we got her. Imagine that level of relief that would provide to a mom, right? And especially, let's say you have to go back to work after you've given birth, not having to take your little 2-month-old to a daycare center. Listen, those of you who've done it, you know how heart-wrenching it is for a young mom to leave her newborn with strangers. I remember taking my son, my oldest, to, it wasn't even a daycare, it was somebody who said that, she had like a daycare center in her home. And that lady was a mother of one of my friends, right? So I was poor, I didn't have a car. So I pushed my son, I don't know how many blocks, to her house with his little bag, diapers, formula. I went to work and I came back at 5 o'clock and I went to pick up that child. I think they had given him half a bottle of the 3 or 4 bottles of formula that he had. His diaper was wet. He had a rash. Listen, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm saying that co-living, co-housing model would be, if it was designed correctly and it had the right people in there, would be a relief for younger families. And if you had somebody who was older, because it was a multi-generational type of model, right? Let's say Mrs. So-and-so is living in community. She has her little house, because co-housing means you have your own little dwelling. You're not sharing space with anybody. My vision is like a bunch of, what do we call those? What do you call those? Duplexes, right? Where you share walls, but you have your own space, so that it's easy for you to just Go out of your front door and go next door and say, hey, Miss So and so, are you okay? If Miss So and so went to the hospital and came back and needed somebody to make her some soup or keep an eye over her. Now, we're getting into the details, but just think of how wonderful it would be for people to feel, yes, I agree, for people to feel that they are supported, that they're not alone. Because when they studied places like England, and if I remember, I'll circle back and tell you my experience studying the NHS, the English healthcare system. But that level of support, it is so nurturing, right? Because then you eliminate the risk of isolation and loneliness. And in those communities, they also have, you know, how in our subdivisions in the state, they have the clubhouse, right? They have a gathering place where people once a week, they do like a potluck. So you have, and everything is kind of organized. So this week, you're going to have these ladies responsible for the meal, right? And then they have, you know, sous chefs and everything. And then everybody gathers. Just imagine that. Let's say you have a community of 30 people, and once a week, unless you're working, everybody gathers. They talk, they play cards, they play whatever games. They inquire about each other's life, and they're really committed to getting to know you, and to they care about you. It's not force, it's not something that they are, you know, pretending, you know what I'm saying? So to me, that is so ideal. So that model of co-housing is, it is popular. I'm not saying it's just blowing up, but this is something that people are looking at. Now, you still have those people with the mentality of, what would I call that? Singularity. They just like to be in their own little bubble. Well, that may not be attractive to you. But frankly, I think somebody like that would be in the minority. Survival, yes. I would love to live in a supportive community environment. Yes, ma'am. I have been so isolated for too long, and I'm so sorry that it. And think about it from a sociological standpoint. We have bought into the lie. I have bought into it that, you know, when you move from the city, or where you had community, you move to the burbs where you can have a bigger house, right? You have a bigger yard, you have a dog and stuff. Do you really have community when you move to the suburbs? Do you know your neighbors? Do you get together? You know, when I was in New York, you go to Brooklyn sometime in the week on the weekend. They have block parties. They block the roads. People come out. The music is popping. The food, and people are having fun. I don't know that I'm talking about that for co-living. Co-living is more planned, right, and more intentional. And you have a board that makes some of these decisions of the who, how, what, where, when. You have people that have been elected, part of the community. They are not strangers from outside the community. So you have a board, and you have bylaws, you got rules, you got the enforcers, right? So it's like, to me, like a condo association type uh, format, but you don't have somebody doing your grass, you're responsible for it. Or it could be that they hire a company to come and cut it, and everybody pays, you know, that can be done easily. But I'm talking of a more of the psychological benefits of living in community, of not being isolated. It does so much for your well being. And for my sister who says she's been isolated, and I think when you are in co housing, right, for somebody who's an introvert like myself, that would be perfect because I don't like to be around people all the time. I really don't. They snap my energy, and I need to run, go indoors to recharge, right? But I can emerge when I need to. I would go into to those potluck, maybe not every single week. You know what I'm saying? At least people have options. So, oh, the England part I wanted to tell you. Is it in the 1990? No, I think maybe 2000. I had sold my home care company and I was traveling. So at that time, it was like, maybe I'd like to move to Europe. Well, that was way before I got enlightened. And now I said, no, no. I said, well, maybe you could go to England, or I think I went and I studied in England. I don't know how I found this nurse. She was doing nurse training for a lot of foreign nurses, foreign trained nurses. So in my class, we have people from India, people from Russia, people from the Caribbean, all over. I was from America, lots of people from Australia, believe it or not, who wanted to come to the UK and work as nurses. So this lady, she was an educator in the healthcare field. She put together this 3-week program. And I remember I took my daughter with me, and they made arrangement for housing in like a college dorm, and we were in there. I mean, it was fun. And she had a curriculum, not necessarily clinical because we were already clinicians, but it was a compare and contrast. She was giving us a lot of data about the healthcare system in England, the NHS, which is universal healthcare, something that is totally foreign to me. So I was lapping it up, learning. And we also looked at demographics. Hola, Christine. Afua KD, we are going back to co-living, like it or not. I love it. Imagine folks investing together to purchase property. It's happening all over the world in some capacity, right? All right, let's get to this. I don't want to be all over the place, right? But I'm just giving you an example of my experience, not necessarily about co-living. So when I learned about the NHS system, people you hear complain all the time. I remember I was in a cab with this driver, and he said, "Oh, you're from America?" Yes. And he's like, "Oh, America, I want to go to America." It's like, "Why do you want to go to America?" Well, that was before now. So he's talking, thinking everything is rosy. And I'm like, "Oh, hold up. It's not really, it's not balloons and roses." And he started talking about how the NHS was bad, how they have to wait so long to get something, blah, blah, blah. But the lady who was our instructor, he was saying how you, oh, you left Panama. Well, sis, you might reconsider because we're on a path to make it where we're not so alone, right? They talked about how when you move, when a child is born, they know your family, they have your address. And they look at numbers in the community, and then they have different local centers, medical centers in those communities. So you are automatically assigned a center. So this is where you go to get your health care that is managed, right? So because if you have a child, the child is registered there. So all the checkups and vaccines, everything is handled there. Your pediatrician is there, the laboratory is there, and everything is managed like we think about managed care in the US. That means you don't get to decide you're going to go over here. No, you got to go to your center first, and your physician manages your care. If you get to a point where you need specialized care, then your physician makes a referral. Now, again, for emergency services, well, that was then she told me. I don't know if it's, it's a caveat. I don't know if it's the same now. If you have an emergency, if it's something a life and death, yes, you call 911 wherever you are. They will take care of you, but then they're still talking to your physician at your center, right? But having said that, they started showing us data about their outcome because of the way the care is just managed and organized. So people don't fall through the cracks. You cannot say, oh, I can't go to the doctor because I can't afford this or that. No, you don't have any excuse. So the data they were showing me, hi, Janine Benet. Tanya Brooks, hola, ¿cómo estás? So one of the things that she shared with us, because we were a clinician, I'm a critical care nurse. That was before I became a nurse practitioner. My specialty was cardiology and gerontology, the heart and aging, old people. I love old people. I like myself because I'm old. But what she shared with us was what we call the health outcomes for their country. And there are so many there's a lot of criticism about the system. When you talk to a Canadian, you talk to somebody from the UK, they talk about the wait and all that, because you have that, but you have the option of buying private insurance. That's what they don't tell you. You can't. Uh, but they were showing us that from a management standpoint, they were doing better with cardiac care. They were doing better managing diabetics. They were doing better managing cancer because people did not fall through the cracks. If they say you're coming to get your well care, you better show up. And someone was sharing with me the healthcare system in France is almost like that. When your baby is born, I was told, is that you registered with that center also. England, Germany, and other places, they'll send the nurses to your home to teach you about lactation and all that, how to breastfeed, and the things that is just part of healthcare. But if they say, okay, this is your appointment for your baby, and if you don't show up, they say a nurse is at your door the next day saying, hello, you missed your appointment, what happened? So you don't think a care model that is managed like that is going to yield better outcome? I think so. So when people are telling you about other healthcare system, well, yeah, if I'm old right now, I have arthritis, and I say, oh, I really need to have a knee replacement. The doctor said, yeah, it's bone on bone. Yes, you may have to wait 6 months to get that done. But if you call the ambulance, they're gonna take care of you, and then you don't get a whole bill afterward. I don't know about you, but I'll take it. I would take that. So when I finished the 3 weeks, it was 3 week. I was in class from 8 to 5. My daughter was roaming the streets. Shh. I gave her a phone and I was like, I'm gonna be in class. You better be good out there. And she had a ball because I wasn't like over, and it was so much fun. Well, of course, they're overstretched and underfunded. Yes, and you read about that all the time. But isn't that better than what we have? I don't know about you. I think so. I think so. Yes. Oh, there Christine is there. Well, thank you, Christine. So I wasn't telling a lie. But the one thing I wanted to tell you, besides how it's organized, is that this lady who was our instructor, her mother was, like my age now, because I did that almost 20 years ago. She said in England, I don't know, Christine can chime into that. And we went, and I remember we spent a couple of days it was almost like an adult daycare type thing. And it was mostly for Chinese descent people. And they were doing Tai Chi, they were doing painting, they were singing. Let me tell you, they were living La Vida Loca. And then they were cooking. So my program was like, we're going to show you an authentic Chinese whatever, and they cooked authentic Chinese food, which tasted nothing like what we have here in those little mom and pop shops. But what she said, we met some older people, and they said, in our mindset, we don't see aging as something that is negative, nor do we put the responsibility on our children. You know how if mom and dad starts to be unsafe at home, then you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to pay for somebody to come and take care of her, or she's going to burn the place down. That lady said, oh, we don't do that. She said, the moment that we realize that we need a little help, she said, we walked ourselves into those facilities to say, okay, now we sell the house and I'm coming in. The mindset is already prime for being in a facility, maybe with somebody they befriended or somebody they're going to befriend, because to them that is the extension, that's what they expect. And I think it is vital because it takes all the guilt and the stress away from the adult child who has her own family, who has to worry about the grandparents, and we call them the sandwich generation. Remember that? They get caught between their teenagers, young adult, and the aging parents. It's like, where do you go? And a lot of them, you know how it is, they end up having to quit their job because they got to take care of mom and dad who are up in ages. All right. So I think, and you guys can chime in. Where is this? I was talking about England, about an experience I had in the UK when I went there and took a course. And you know what? When I finished, at the end of the program, we had to do a presentation, a verbal presentation. And thank God they speak English, right? I didn't have to do it in Spanish like I did in Chile. But I did a compare and contrast with data comparing the NHS with the US healthcare system that is touted as being the best, the shiniest, but the numbers are horrible. Numbers are horrible on how we do. We spend the most money per capita, that means per person, and we have the worst outcome. And so many people are left out in that equation. People who don't have access to basic healthcare. So by the time they get to the emergency room, the foot is rotten, they have maggots, they got things, because you got people who are homeless in the street, can't go to a doctor. There was a clinic where I was, and it was for homeless people. And you know what they did the most? Foot care. Foot care. Sometimes you open the shoes and the boots and you ready to pass out because somebody in the street is not taking care of their feet. They may be diabetic. They don't know it because they don't go to the doctor. They can't afford to go to the doctor. They're in the streets. And you know that a lot of people in the streets had families. They were just one job away from homelessness. Listen. So the comparison was terrible. And I remember at the end, she said, Maggie, why don't you come over? I'll help you. Well, my daughter was like maybe 15 or 16. I was like, oh, I'd love to. But, you know, she has to finish high school and this. It wasn't the right time for me. And then I met a nurse who came and talked to us. She said she moved to the UK because they had the type of visa at that time that if there was a specialty that they could not fill in, then they would give you a visa, right? And she said she had been there 3 years. And she said, I'm going back. I'm like, wow, what happened? She said it rains all the time and it wasn't good for her mood. And that it does rain a lot. I love the rain, but I like to see the sun sometimes. Okay, so I understood it. But anyway, so that was the mindset of the older people, not feeling like they are a burden and taking the bull by the horn, making their own decision to make it easier for the adult child. And they can just transition into, but you know, long-term care, it's probably, I think it is still part of the NHS, so you don't have to stress over it. But that is the co-housing model that is going on in the States. Now, internationally, you can read about, like I read before about a group of, I don't know how many Asian ladies who are friends. They've been friends forever. And as they all became, you know, divorced and widowed or whatever, they said, like somebody said in the chat, they said they pulled their monies and decided they were going to age together. So they bought this big rambling house. They retrofitted. So each person had their space, and you have that big come together kumbaya room where they can play games, just relax, just hang out. And it's a beautiful thing. Now this would work for me. You know, you have people around you, and then you have your own space. But to me, there would have to be a commitment to community living. That if a sister, and this is where I'm going with single women, if a sister was in need, then you cannot say, oh, well, I don't feel like it. You got to lend a hand. That's an expectation. If a sister, let's say, had surgery, we get together and we take care of her, helping her with follow up appointments, making sure her house is clean, making sure she gets food, making sure we are communicating with, the next of kin outside. That deeper level of community is what I'm looking at. So let me tell you, being a gerontologist, I have been in long-term care facilities. And my number one why is that I don't want to end up in one of those places. Okay? I have children. I have two boys and a girl. My daughter says, oh, mom, I'm going to take care of you. But I don't want to put that burden on her. And that's why I am looking. Of course, I'm in Panama right now. And if somebody said to me one time, are you going to be there forever? What is forever? I don't know that. It has to make sense. Can we create that model that I'm looking at? Now I'm in a high rise. It's not looking like it is a model that would fit into what I'm looking at, right? Because I'm on this floor, we have sisters on that floor. Even though you say hi, everything is good in the morning, anything can happen for the rest of the day, during the day, right? So it's not that intimate. It's not possible to have that good closeness to keep an eye out for each other. So, and again, everything is fluid. But that is the difference that we looked at, for single women. Sorry for your loss. What, did she lose somebody? I don't know. I wasn't looking. The NHS is excellent. Yeah, no direct cost for services to anyone who needs it. We pay through taxation. I think it's the same in Canada. Yes. I know. Like I said, I would take it. Listen, I'm sure you can imagine what happens to people who do not have access. You delay, you don't go, you ignore things. And by the time you enter the healthcare system, it's an emergency and things have happened. Even people with insurance, there is the mindset. Some doctors, they don't care. People, if you there is a YouTube channel called The Patient Story. I don't know if you watch it. It's about a lot of people, a lot of younger people too, telling their story of how they found out they had cancer. And some of those stories are horrifying, right? But over and over, that would say how they were gaslighted. They go to the doctor and have this and that. It's nothing. You get a 25-year-old person coming to you telling you, I have a rash, I can't sleep, I'm sweating at night, and you're saying what? Like she's going through menopause? Some of these doctors are downright negligent and ignorant, and they ignore people's symptoms, whether they don't care. And then you find out something you could have caught maybe a year or two earlier and saved someone's life. You're dealing with that too. Not just that the care is not non-existent, but there is a certain dismissal. They don't care about you. My daughter had her little experience the other day. She said, oh, I felt like a number. I said, sis, I had to break it to you. You are a number in those people's eyes. And that's sad. And I'm like, you want to take me with you? Because I was straightening them up. Like, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this and that. I want this and that. And you have to be your own advocate. And they say that in those stories all along. If they don't do it, you go to the next person, until you get some result. And why should you have to do all that to get basic care? To get someone to listen to you? That's a no bueno. Yeah, the approach of living in community. Now, there are different levels of co-housing, right? Remember, co-housing means you have a community Everybody has their own space. Now, the details of it, let's say if I were to be interested in starting something like that, I probably would fly and go talk to that guy and see his blueprints and talk to him and see. That's what I like to do, right? How you organize it from a legal standpoint. And of course, you need to get legal involved because there has to be some level of commitment. And then you have to develop contingencies for anything else. What if you pass out? Who's going to inherit the place and how do they handle it? So if I were to consult with this person, that guy, he already has all that into place, right? And excuse me, how you design the homes also is important in terms of height and of everything inside the house and outside to minimize risk for fall, the materials, the flooring, and like for our dementia patients, we got to make sure we don't have sharp edges around the house. People sliding over little cute throw rugs in your house, that's a no-no. So all this stuff would have to be taken into consideration, and that if somebody also needs help, you can bring outside help. The nurse can come, the therapist, and whoever else. I have so many ideas in my head on how it would work. Now, can it work here? I don't know. I don't know because many of us are not in housing, we are in apartments, and that's not very conducive to what I have in mind. So you have to always keep your options open, right? NHX works in conjunction with social services for elderly care. Excellent. I sacrificed 5 years of my life caring for my 85 years. Wow. 88-year-old mom. Left my home to live with her. Oh, a lot of us had to do that. Those are, I took care of my mom for a couple of years and I didn't work a day. You just do that. But I think those conversations need to be had early. I'm having this conversation right now with my daughter as to what my wishes are and what I want to do ahead of whatever can happen so that she understands that I don't want to burden her, right? And I know at some level she'll be involved at some point, but I want it to be minimal for her. I think a lot of us feel that way. We don't want to be a burden to our children. That's why we're trying to be proactive, right? I had to quit working to take care of my mom, who was a retired nurse. Yes, ma'am. We do it all the time. No prescription costs for under 18, pregnant women, people on benefits, and over 60. Oh my God. You know what I remember in England? All these older people, they rode the buses, paid nothing. They had a card, you scan, and you went. You didn't pay for, I don't think the metro, but I know the buses, they didn't. I didn't get into that deep tunnel metro. It's kind of scary. It was scary. I was in Manchester, but I remember going to London and then trying to catch the metro. I went 1 floor, 2 floor, 3 floor, 4 floor flat. I said, if anything happens, they'll never find me. I was too deep in. I was like, I'm going to leave it alone. So I stayed, above ground and just kind of took taxis and stuff. I rode those double decker buses. I love that. Yes, and those little ladies would be, they're like, oh no, we don't pay for it. I'm like, ooh. Another thing that impressed me about England was the bus system. Oh my God. When they tell you people are punctual in the UK, don't get it twisted. They are. So people will tell you, if you go into a party in the UK, you better be on time. You are not on Panama time. There is none of that. None of that. I would take the bus. I'm like, I'm standing here at the bus stop. It says 1:18 the next stop. At 1:16 that bus is coming. It was eerie. So I remember trying to get back home. So I took a bus to the airport in Manchester and then another flight to London and then another flight to where I was going. But it was like the punctuality was mind blowing. I love that. God give you your heart's desires. Well, sis, I tell people what I'm trying to do. Yes, it is self serving, it is for me. And the reason I opened it to other sisters, I'm like, if you're thinking along the same line and you would like to see something like that, because a lot of us, growing old alone is scary. It's scary. And some people who are used to having people around, it does something. Because when you turn around and there's nobody in the house, for me, it's great. Remember, I'm an introvert. I love looking at the walls. And, after a few days, like this morning, I got out and I was like, oh my God, I haven't been out of the house since Monday because that heat out here is keeping me indoors. It is cray cray this year. But if you are used to having people around, and the idea of being an older person and being by yourself can be downright scary. Okay? Christine, co-housing sounds excellent. That's what I would ultimately you would like, right? It just needs to be well managed and legally airtight. Yes. So we'll talk about that in a few seconds of some of the things that we would need to have to make sure it works. There's a sister here who's doing some type of Golden Girls co-housing, but I don't know how it works. I know she has it's a membership type of thing, and then people find each other. So the YouTube page that I started is for that purpose also. If you're in my community and you want to talk about co-housing, so when we continue to meet on Saturdays, so you can go ahead. If you see somebody say something, you're like, oh, where do you live or whatever, you can exchange information on here and then go off the website and kind of keep up with each other and then kind of vet each other out. Okay. My mom put the hospice nurse out. She sounds funky because she refused their service. Yes, some of them do that. She said they weren't going to kill her. She said she would go when God got ready for her. Oh my God. I think I would love your mom. She got a lot of spunk in her. But you know how many times we as clinicians, I'm impressed with the hospice nurses because they're usually right on the money. Usually, your mom was an exception. But when they call you and say, I think you need to come, usually you need to come because, right, there's some signs that show that that time is getting near. But the whole hospice concept is just such a nice one for people without support. And they support the families even after the person dies. And that's awesome. And I worked for hospice for a very short time. I did not really enjoy my time at hospice, and I'll tell you why. Because I was in the hospital responsible for screening people. You get what we call a referral from the physician or the social worker to go evaluate this patient who doesn't look like she's doing so good for hospice care. And you qualify for hospice when the doctor determines that you have like 6 months or less. And your mom bucked that trend and said she's not ready. And that happens sometimes. But I would go and see, my heart, I have a tender heart for my patients, right? But I also think a little bit different from people about death. See, I think death is a natural thing. And personally, I don't want to fight it. I'm not a person who wants to be kept alive regardless or at any price. And I put that in my daughter's head. I'm like, if you do that to me, I will haunt you. Because in the States, I have a do not resuscitate. I don't want dialysis. I don't want this. I don't want any of that. God has allowed me to live this long. And when in my time to go, I'm ready to go. So I don't want to fight anything. So I would be a good hospice patient, right? But so it's important for us to understand where we stand, and then we respect everybody's philosophy. The way I think about it doesn't have to be the way you think about it, right? But I love the hospice concept. But what happened with that company is that even though it was a hospital, nonprofit affiliated hospital, it's run like a business. If you know it, it's all about Medicare was paying, whoever was paying. So when they give you the referral, there was pressure on us to make sure we admit that person. So I would go and do an evaluation and I would say, well, they're not ready, because sometimes the family has to come to term that this person is terminal. It's not something that everybody, they don't think like me to say, oh well, the time has come. Some people are not ready for that. So you have to allow them time to understand what's going on and to get to the point of acceptance, because they're starting the grief process right there. So I would say they're not ready, and they're like, "Well, how come? Why didn't you?" I'm like, you know what? This is not for me, because I am not the person who's going to say, "Oh, I need to meet that quota, therefore I have to admit." Mm-mm, mm-mm. So I left. It wasn't for me. Not for me. I will maintain the vegetable garden. All right. Okay, vegetable garden, the co-housing community. Christine, do you know that in that place in California, those communities, they have multiple gardeners. The place, I've seen some places online look pristine and everything is green. Yeah, they have people who give painting classes, people who are into arts and craft. That's not me. I'd be in the kitchen. They have the kitchen crew. Oh yes, and then people are just so happy and willing to give. Imagine if you retired and I could do Spanish classes. Some people would do salsa dancing, and you could even bring the young kids. Imagine that. You may have some piano teachers, some kids could come keep you young. Oh my God, so much you could do. And I think there's another guy, it wasn't co housing, but he was developing a newer model of, is it dementia residences, so to speak? Yes, where they has it's like a compound, and then people are not restricted. They can wander and do this and do that. So a lot of people are thinking of different ways of doing it. But I don't know about you. I think that co-housing community living, I think it's the way to go. I struggle with that. I belong to a church in Florida. And as a nurse and a gerontologist, I went to the pastor, the what do you call them? The people in power. And I said, you have a church with so many, and we had a lot of people, with so many people. I said, I think it would be helpful if you had like I don't even know what we called it, a group of volunteer ladies to kind of keep an eye on people when they return home from the hospital, either post surgery, new moms. Imagine a new mom that could have someone come for a couple of hours with a crying newborn who doesn't sleep, and give her some time where she can take a shower and just relax. Imagine that. That's priceless. And then it would be a volunteering thing. Do you know they did not even look at it? They weren't interested. I'm like, oh, so you'd rather post little notes on the board that says so and so is looking for someone to stay with her a couple of hours a day, instead of giving me the okay to start. And you know what? I'm not very patient. When somebody can't see the vision, I move. I can't. I'm not going to waste my energy trying to convince you of something I know could work. And I am a risk taker. So I'm always going to say, well, let's get all the information I can. Like Christine said, tight. Yeah. Let's consult with legal. Let's consult with the architect, and let's talk to the sisters. Let's do some focus group and talk about it. But let's not get caught up in analysis paralysis, and then you're talking about it for 2 years and nothing happens. I'm not that person. I'm not that person. So it's just important to get it done, right? Get it done. I'm not patient like that. So the garden is a good idea. My friend in California was just talking about co-living earlier. You can ask her, if you watch the video I just posted, I think in the section resources, I posted the community in California that this guy, he started it like I think in the 70s or 80s, and he still lives there. And so they have several communities in California and other states, that is doing his vision. Metro and buses are free. Yay! So, I'm glad I'm not lying. I don't know how to lie anyway. Hope Suzanne, my issue is I have health issues and don't know how to move abroad without help. Yes, it would depend on the extent of the health issues, right? If you are in a situation where you need 24-hour care, it's not going to work, right? Even when we have a co-housing community, theoretically, right? And that's going to be something that is spelled out. At one point, do you need to consider an institution, right? And if you don't want that, do you have the means to have care come into your home? There is a choice that need to be made. And we say also that co-housing doesn't mean we're responsible for you 24/7. No, right? We're your sisters, we're supportive, and we are going to provide a certain level of assistance. But if it becomes to the point where you need somebody to move you into bed, you can't walk by yourself, you can't turn by yourself, that is something to reconsider, right? There are people who have moved abroad with their older parent, and they are able to hire locals to come and help. But there's a sister in sorry, there's a sister in Mexico who's got her mom, and she said she was able to hire people to come and take care of her mom as a living. So that is a possibility, okay? But we have a sister here. She used to be part of our group. She's no longer, but she has 24-hour help. She has someone come Monday to Friday, every day, and then someone else does the weekend. And she got them 24/7. And how much of it can you afford? So you have to look at your money, your willingness to have someone be in your space, because that's still better than being in an institution. Now, we have a sister here with her mom, and the mom got to a point because of dementia that the mom had to be in a facility, because dementia is a whole different ballgame. If you have someone in a co-living environment, and then they can't be trusted with the stove, they have a risk of escaping and all that. So all that would have to be included, because co-living is not the end of it all. It's not the solution to everything. Once you start having major medical issues, you have to be true to yourself. And I think, in my mind, I'm thinking there has to be like an admission process, a screening process to say, is this person suitable, right? To live in co-housing. And then co-living, we're going to talk about, is a whole different thing, because you're living in smaller spaces, but some sisters are doing it. In my building here, there's a group of sisters who are living in an apartment, and it is no problem for them because they're super independent. They're not in each other's spaces, and it works. So it can work for some people. But I think being like in a community or housing close to each other, I think that's much nicer. I had a sister, hola Greta. I had a sister said to me, what did she say about co-housing? Okay, I forgot what I was going to say, but you could do co-living inside an apartment, and again, you have to have the criteria. And what I wanted to talk about before was, how do you vet someone if you are? Oh, I know what I was going to say. There was a sister who, that's the way my brain works now. I forget in the moment, it comes back to me later. I call it the delayed synapses. They don't do this. They go before they connect, because the message has to go. She said to me, she said, do you think some of your sisters would be interested in a small, what do they call it, tiny home community? I said, I'm pretty sure there would be. I said, it's not as easy to do in a place like Panama. Maybe we'll talk about a little bit about why Panama may or may not work for the co-housing, because You can't be too far from services. And it's not a multi-generational type of housing community. You're talking about older people who need their doctors around, pharmacy, the stores, and all that. So location, 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 and access to services. There is one community I looked at. It's about 2 hours from Panama City. Well, I like to be close to the city because I like to have things accessible. And if we don't have any land in the city and around the city, what do you do? Decisions, decisions, right? Hola, Maggie, that was Greta. The only problem I have with the UK is the weather. Didn't I say that, Christine? That nurse said she was leaving. She said it's too dreary. She said it was working on her mental health and she had to go. I mean, I love the rain, but I want it every single day. I remember being in Manchester. I mean, we were wearing jackets and coats every day, the raincoats. Where's the sun? Hey, I'm from the Caribbean. I need some sunlight, so that would be a problem too. Christine, I am an extroverted introvert. I love that. I don't know that I would say I'm extroverted introvert. I'm not extroverted at all. I just emerge, I do what I need to do, and then I retract. Yes. I could be here every single day, except that I know I need to get out and get some vitamin D. I need to get out. I don't want to be in the house all day because vitamin D is vital to my health. And taking a vitamin D pill is not the same as getting some sunlight. Sun kissed, sunbathed. There's nothing quite like it. You don't need a lot of it, but you need a little bit. Hospice helped save my sanity. They are a special group of people. But one day when I was a supervisor in a facility and I knew somebody was on hospice. So I'm making rounds and making sure. And the hospice nurse, this guy, was sitting next to the patient with a big old plate of food and he's just shoving his face. And I'm like, can I talk to you for a minute? I'm like, this person is dying. If you want to eat, have someone else come and relieve you. Don't do that. And I said that to his boss, and they were like, oh, that's not biggie. And I'm like, I have a problem with that. It shows a lack of respect for this person's dignity, who's ready to just kind of get out the last breath, and you're stuffing your face right next to the. Mm-mm. I don't see that. They don't like me because I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Mm-mm. But most of the hospice people are very kind and understanding, and especially when you have families who are kind of freaking out, and they're really good at giving information and holding your hands, right, because nobody wants to see their loved ones suffer. And when they take that last breath, it is such a finality. It's really hard for some people. But being a medical person, I have facilitated some beautiful ending. I remember this. We used to have like 24-year-old massive heart attacks. I remember this guy working construction and they brought him in and they said he just started sweating and throwing up. He was on a scaffold or whatever. They brought him down. He came to us looking ashen, and I know exactly he was having a right-sided heart attack. And I look at the doctor and I'm like, that's the right-sided one. So it's like fluid or whatever, but he didn't make it. So as the doctor was like, there's not much we can do. So his family was all over the place. So we got on the phone and got everybody in. And you give him medication. And what these people do all the time? Not all the time. Sometimes they hang on. They hang on to see that person come, hold their hand and say, it's okay, Dad. It's okay. You can let go now. And then they go. So I remember his family flying in here and there, and we had chairs around his bed. We lowered the lights. We played some soft music, and when they all were there, we closed the door. It was such a I don't know how I would describe it. It was a moment that was almost sanctified for them to be able to say goodbye to their loved one. And we, as the nurses, in an environment where we just like pumping on people's chests because we were in the intensive care unit, right? We could have transferred him to a step down, but we said no. We're gonna wait till his family comes, and when it happened, and I'm through. The family was so thrilled. It was hugs, and you as a nurse, you know how many tears you've shed because every time you lose someone, you boohoo crying, and it can become exhausting. And that's why sometimes the nurses, the hospice nurses, need to go see the chaplain themselves. Because sometimes if you have 5 deaths in a week, it gets to you. So you have to constantly have someone talking to you about the beauty of what you're doing so that it doesn't affect you. Like I was talking to a sister today, one of my students. I'm like, yesterday, after hearing the stuff about the Cassandra doll and then the kid who got hit, killed, running around and somebody got acquitted, like nothing happens, it does a number to your psyche, sis. So you have to find a way to talk to yourself and get yourself off that edge, so you can remain sane. Because my theory, and I'm not doing research, is that there is a fine line between sanity and insanity. And sometimes it doesn't take something major to make you coop. So you have to be careful yourself up here. All right. Not fighting the end. No, ma'am, I'm not. I'd love to know what the site is where people can find each other for co-housing. Well, if you're on my site right now, and I don't know that they're using it that way, but that's what I want it to be. There are 25 people who signed up to that. It's called the Co-Living Hub. The Co-Living Hub. And I think you all need to just start talking to each other and say, hey, I'm in Maryland. I'd love to talk to someone who's interested in co-housing in Panama, in Ecuador, in wherever. And you know what? You can even consider co-housing in the US. It doesn't have to be abroad, right? It doesn't have to be abroad. And in fact, there is a community in, I want to say Texas, where they do it. It's a tiny home community, and I think they do have a YouTube. Somebody was interviewing them, and then they were saying, "Well, they don't look like us, though." Okay, remember that. They talk about how nice it is to be able to, you go out in the afternoon, you sit on your porch, and you get your chairs together, and you talk about the weather, the birds, or whatever. That is socialization. Socialization is so important as you age. You got to talk to people. You got to feel connected. And when you don't have that, that's when you die earlier. People who are connected live longer. It's been proven. Okay? Okay. The Co-Living Hub on YouTube. Okay? Right there. The California model sounds really good. Yes. And it's multi-generational, right? But personally, I don't want to hear a bunch of kids running around. I don't want mine to be, my preference would not be I don't want a bunch of kids running, teenagers. I don't want that. Right? So that's why if you want to keep it as a 55 plus community, you could say 60 plus. Well, you don't want to 55, we wouldn't leave it like that. You don't want to discriminate too much. They have one in Colorado. I think it's for it's an LGBT one. Imagine being a minority like that and have a community that supports you. You got to understand, people need to be supported and not having to fight every single day for who they are and what they believe. You know what I mean? Let people be themselves and just enjoy the rest of their lives. All right. The co-housing communities I've seen in the States have not been affordable. Oh, interesting, Hope. I don't know. I haven't looked into that in terms of pricing. But remember, if you're doing tiny homes, right? Because as an oh, you know what else they had in those communities? You need to have like a 1 bedroom, 1 bath. And some people have a studio. What do you need more space for? You don't need that. So if you said, I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to buy a tiny home, you need a place to maybe cook some food. Easy does it. You don't have to be like Maggie that needs a big kitchen, because that's my little parlor. 1 bathroom, one. You can have a little room where you have a sofa, a place to put your computer, a little console for your TV. You don't need much. And a little patio. I'm into patios when you can get outside, get some fresh air. Those communities also had housing for visitors. So if your family is visiting, there's no pressure on you for them to stay with you. That's included in that community. All right? So if you're going to go to California, of course, it's going to be more expensive. But if you want to do it in the States, you want to go somewhere where it's affordable, right? And still have access to doctors, pharmacy, and all this thing. I think it's doable in some communities. Now, we are in a different time of our lives where we can just say, oh, we're going to go to Idaho where land is cheap and do that. No bueno. We're not doing that. But I can see myself doing something like that somewhere outside of Miami, for example. All right. All you need is somebody with the vision. You need a business person with the vision who doesn't just want to consider that just as a way to make money. I almost want to say you could connect something like that as a nonprofit for a church, but me and churches were like, So you got to take consideration of all these things, but just don't do it where the real estate is unaffordable, right? The church wasn't interested because they were not. Okay, I just said that. Me and churches, no. Unbelievable that a church would, of course. Oh, come on, Christine. Why is it unbelievable? People are rotten over there. No. I don't need that much care, at least not at this time. Okay, well, again, Suzanne, is it Suzanne? Yeah, Hope Suzanne. If you drop me an email, I could, like I said, I know a sister here who has 24-hour help, and you don't need to have 24 hours, but they have agencies here who are going to send someone into your home to stay with you and provide care for so many hours, right? But I run a home care company. What you run into sometimes is that sometimes they don't show up. That's just the risk that you run. And that's why being in co-living is the way to go, right? Because when that happens, then you don't have to just, oh my God, I'm going to be alone. Somebody is going to say, okay, I can stop and stay with you for a couple of hours or whatever. But there's a lady in Mexico who has her mom who has 24-hour care. So this is my email. If you just send me an email, I'll see if I can find. Did somebody interview her? But I'm sure if you could find that information if you ask somebody like Adelia or Casa Elm, these people over there who are in Mexico, they would know who it is, because she talks about that all the time, that it makes it easy for her to take care of her mom. And I think if somebody does not have advanced dementia, I think it's very easy to hire someone to take care of them. But when you get dementia, it just complicates the problem because of the risk of elopement and accident. Elopement means they get out and they get lost. And a lot of time they find them dead. So this is a risk. Even if I were to manage a community like that, of course, I know once you get to that point where you're not safe, they would have to be going to a secure facility for their safety and yours. Okay. Those are great ideas that can work when people have integrity. Yes, ma'am. The church may not have wanted to assume the risk of vulnerable people being exploited. That is true. That is definitely a reason. I'm just not in a positive mindset with churches these days from the things that I see going on. Yeah. All right, let's see. And there are so many people with agendas out there, right? And you know what happens to our vulnerable adults. People calling saying, "Oh, I'm your grandson. I'm in jail. I need you to wire me so much money." And now with AI, they say they can copy the voice of your grandson to the T. So how do you know it's not your grandson, right? They tell us here in Panama to be careful because they have a lot of scamming going on through the phone. I said, well, you're not going to get me because I don't answer phones from numbers I don't recognize. Anybody who can call me is in my phone. If it's a strange number, I don't answer. I don't even have a voicemail set up, right? So if you call me, I don't answer. You leave me a message and I'll return the message when I'm available. So that one they're not gonna get me with it. But people will overcharge and give you a sappy story like this home health aide who was working for me, sitting with a little lady with like moderate dementia. And then I got a call one day from the lady's lawyer who was managing her estate, and he showed me a bunch of canceled checks that were made to my employee. If I tell you the ground, I felt like I wanted to go disappear under the ground when he showed me that. He said, your employee has been taking money from my client who has dementia. How do you explain that? I didn't have an answer. So I called the lady in, tall African American woman. The patient, 4'9", white lady with white hair. I said, how come you took so much money from the patient? She said, oh, well, I was sitting there, because when you sit with the patient, you got to find something to talk about. You didn't bring your knitting or anything. And she said, I was just saying, school was opening. I didn't have money to buy shoes for my kids. I didn't have this and that. So every time she met the lady, she complained about not having money for this and that. And the lady, well, at 200, 300, I think it was amounted to almost $2,000. And then I said, ma'am, this is not your parent. Why would you think it's okay to take money from an older person? She said, oh, you waiting for this? You ready for this? She said, she told me I reminded her of her daughter. I almost fell out. I said, you and her? I'm like, you better find me another answer. This is not the right answer. You are fired. Oh my God. She said, "Well, no one told me I couldn't take money from her." And then she mentioned a lawyer's name. I said, "You go ahead and call him and see what happens." And then that was one of the reasons. After a while, I'm like, you know what? I'm leaving this business because I'm the one going to jail. Because people who hire to provide a service for you do not have your level of integrity, and they're going out there doing things under your name. No bueno. That's why right now people say, oh, Maggie, don't you want to open a restaurant? No, I don't. I don't want to hire people anymore. I've done that, suffered through it. No mas. No, I don't. The Yes, I saw that, Matia, because they did a big program about how Panama is not ready for the numbers of growing, older people. And unfortunately, Panama is experiencing what we have experienced in the States, aging parents and adult children having to work outside the home, right? Because typically, because you're Panamanian, you can chime in that you take care of your loved ones like they do in Africa and the Caribbean. But because of everything being so expensive And life being expensive, people are having to go outside. And when you go out and work, who takes care of your aging parent? So they're showing them on TV, and the people just sitting around saying that, have nothing to do, nowhere to go, nobody cares for them. The other day, even there was a hospital, I think in La Chorrera, they were talking about patients who are dumped at the hospital. A caregiver brings the patient in and they disappear. They never come pick them up. They don't answer calls. The hospital cannot discharge the patient. They have people who've been there 2 years. This growing old is scary. So that's why we're talking about it. What can we do so that if you get sick, nobody's not going to just dump me over there and forget me saying, I can't take care of her. I'm not going to pick her up. Can you live with yourself? Oh my God. This is what I'm saying. People are just wicked. That is not going to bode well for you. To dump your parent and just ignore, turning your phone off, changing your number so they can't contact you. I think that should be a crime if they find you. So now they're having that, there are a lot of people need jobs. So those people who are being trained could be the people we hire to come in to take care of us. But guess what? No hablan español, no hablan inglés. This is the only thing I could do for when we got our association, teaching them some English so that they can communicate with you a little bit. They're not going to be proficient or expert, but if you say agua, water, they'll know what that means. If you say pain, they'll know what you mean. Listen, we have to bridge the gap somehow. So yes, some people were saying, oh yeah, I'm ready to be trained to take care. That would be like a home health aid course, right? Which I've taught. I've done CNA, Certified Nursing Assistant, and Home Health Aid course. And you have modules and you put them through it. You show them how to transfer patient, take care of them, make a bed, those kind of things. Yeah, I've done that. But in Espanol, you'd have to do it. So I think first of all, for us, we would have to have a class for caregivers on how to communicate, not how to do the care. The INADET, or whatever we call that, can teach them the basic skills, but then they need the communication skills, right? Good evening, Auntie. Yeah, I need the sun. You need the sun. Greta, what's rude? What's rude, Auntie? Lynette, my mother's passing was beautiful. Oh, I'm so glad I was beside her when she took flight. Isn't that the most beautiful thing? You hold their hand and you say, it's okay, Dad. It's okay, Mom. And then sometimes they'll say they see angels or whatever. Oh, unforgettable. So that's why I say death doesn't have to be scary. The benefit of having hospice is that they go in to manage the symptoms, right? When you have somebody dying of what we call heart failure, sometimes the lungs and the hearts just get congested with fluid. And for you to be watching your loved one struggling to catch their breath, no. Hospice puts them on, we do all kinds of things to just kind of reduce the stress. And that's why when we have people who are dying, someone say, oh, she's not eating. Stop it. They don't need to eat anymore. The brain has shut down saying, we're done. So that's why when people say, well, I'm going to put a tube, that's your decision. I don't want one. I don't. Okay? And everybody has to decide for themselves. Oh, thank you so much, whoever did the super chat. But those are things that you have to come to terms with as you age. And nobody is here to justify or criticize. Everybody needs to decide for themselves, right? How would you like to go? What's important to you? What is your philosophy of life and death? Are you more interested in the quality of your life, or do you want to live as long as possible no matter what? Sis, no judgment. No judgment. Okay? Hola, Maria. She said, good morning. You must be somewhere where it's morning. Sacred. Okay. I don't know. She said that's rude. I don't know what she was talking about. Good morning, Maria. Yeah, the moment where they, oh, yes. And we as nurses, like I said, even though we were in a high acuity and intense unit where, we were coding people left and right, but we understood the sacred, how sacred that is to facilitate that for somebody to leave with their loved ones and just, yes, I have sat through so many and facilitated, whether it was in the home or, and then, I'd be on the phone calling somebody saying, can you make a flight? You need to get here if you want to see your mom, make it possible. And they're always so grateful that you took the time to call them, give him the information, and keeping the patient up to date. She's on her way. Because like I said, they're hanging on just to see this child or their sister or whoever it was. Okay, it's really weird to see that as soon as the person comes, it's like now they can go. Oh, listen, there's a lot we don't understand about humanity. Yes, there are. The atmosphere in my father's room was so beautiful as he was passing. We had beautiful music playing. Yes. My brother waited for me to get to Atlanta before he went. Listen. And my mom last word was take care of yourself and I love you, baby. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, remember to like. I think they're doing good with the like. Thank you. All right, Maggie, I appreciate your willingness, thoughts, and ideas to assist others. I'm eternally grateful. Oh, Lynette, you're welcome. So after I finish reading these, we're going to talk about how it would look, right? Co-housing versus co-living. Because, I'm a realist. You can have this idea of how it could best work, but what can you do right now with what you have? That's what we need to talk about, okay? No, either. Well, Idaho might have cheap real estate. Now, Auntie, come on. You should have said no bueno. Thank you so much for the super chat. Oh my God. Okay, let's see. Ooh. Oh, stop it. What's happening here? All right. The person eating in the same room, the person who was in a, rude. Yeah, it's just more than rude. That's what happens with a lot of nurses. And I tell them, I said, sometimes it's okay for you to step away and go drive that truck. Because once you lose the ability to be in the moment, to be a human, a caring human being, you need to leave, right? And I think sometimes the work is so hard and it is so ungrateful because you get some patients and families who are just crummy people, right? But I have to say that the majority of the people are beautiful and, and they thank you and they appreciate you. So if you're letting the few bad apples change your heart as to how you see this patient, this person, what I used to always tell myself, I said, I don't care if somebody is difficult, if they're rude, if they're racist or whatever. If you can't deal with it, then you need to kind of move to an assignment because underneath all that is a human being who needs your care. And that's why it takes a toll on healthcare people because we are so committed and it takes everything that we have. And sometimes the environment, the pressures, it sucks the life out of you, right? And that's why some people crash and burn. And they talk about burnout in healthcare. And now I can only imagine how bad it is with people feeling like they can't say anything to you to your face while you're wiping their butt. Uh-huh. Yeah. You think you all that. You can even go to the bathroom by yourself, but you can spew out your hate. Yes. This nurse the other day, he posted on, I don't know, TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. But he said, I just had a patient spit on me twice. He's a big guy. He said, and there was nothing I could do about it. Some responses could land you in jail. Like my CNA who was trying to bathe this patient with dementia, and the patient took the shampoo bottle and hit her with it. If you understand dementia, you would not worry about it. But she reacted and pop out with the patient. Mm, guess what? She was escorted out in handcuffs. They don't play with that. We, as healthcare people, have no rights whatsoever. The abuse that we suffer, well, I can't say that I've had. I've been pretty lucky. I had a patient one time that I did an evaluation. The door was open. It was in a building, an assisted living, and then the door was open. So I knocked, and then I see this guy down the hall. And then he turned around. He said, "Who the hell are you?" I said, "Well, my name is Maggie. I am from this company, and I'm here doing an evaluation." He said, "You're a nurse?" I said, "Yes." He said, "A black nurse?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I've never met one." I said, "Well, you have now." But sometimes the dementia, I don't know if you heard that, it kind of removes all the filters and it just comes out. You may not be able to put up with it. And then, as I was standing there looking at him, his wife walked in with the laundry. She had gone to the laundromat. And she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I said, "Ma'am, it's okay. But I want to tell you right now, we can't take him on as a patient because I will not subject my patient, my staff to this kind of verbal, we're not doing it." And I walked out. I didn't play that when I had my agency. If somebody had the least amount of whatever you want to say about my staff that you didn't know, I'm like, "I'm not taking you on as a patient. You go next door. Adelante." All right. Uh, yes. We did a presentation, Mintia, last month about we most of us want to be cremated, but you do buy the plan, and then you have an option to either be buried here or have your body repatriated over there, which very pricey. And most of us say, "You just cremate me." And my daughter said to me one time, she said, "Well, would you mind being fertilizer?" And the first time she said, I'm like, "Oh no." I said, "You need to find somewhere and spread my ashes." A year later, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I have plants. It's no problem. Just put a little bit in each pot. I'm good." You don't even need to carry a little bit in. Some people put it in a locket or whatever. I don't even need a memorial service. Don't talk about me. Just let me go. It's good. You don't need to do that. Okay? So I'm okay. Our society allows us to put pets down, but they are suffering and there's no good treatment. Yes, yes. Oh, well, that's a whole different conversation. Yes, 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 yes. I don't even know what to say about that, right? Remember Wisconsin doctor? What was that doctor that used to do assisted suicide? But then they have countries that have changed some of the laws. If people have no chance of getting cured, watching somebody suffer, pain, it's just not a good thing. I remember seeing this lady. She was maybe in her 40s, and she had metastatic breast cancer, and that lady was in pain. Well, that was before pain management. And I tell people, if I am dying, you make sure I'm comfortable. Don't worry about my respiration. I don't care about that. Just keep me comfortable. But then, if you find a doctor who understands that, you're good. If you find a doctor who doesn't understand that, you're in trouble. And I think in Panama, in some of these countries, we may have a problem because they're not really understanding the do not resuscitate concept that care is going to be given. I don't even know if they have pain management yet. I haven't looked at that, even though I read that they have a new wing that has opened at Ciudad de la Salud, which is where they have all the specialties, and they have palliative care. Palliative care is where they manage uncontrollable symptoms, including pain, diarrhea, whatever. But for you to be at home dying of something and a doctor understanding and giving you enough pain medication, that could be a challenge. Because remember, it's a very Catholic oriented life is that could be a problem. That could be a problem. So we need to look at that. Fertilizer. Kevorkian, yes, Auntie. He must be dead by now, Dr. Kevorkian. It was a long time ago. Lots of morphine. Don't worry about my breathing. Just keep me comfortable. Yes. And hospice has like they give morphine, Ativan. They have medication they put under your tongue to kind of dry up the secretion so people don't gargle and just, yeah. And I'm like, give it to me. Give it to me. I don't want to suffer. I do not want to suffer. And I think most people don't want to suffer. Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to suffer. Pain is, whew, no bueno. Yep. All right. So we're at the end of the comments. So what I am thinking, remember, we talked about the co-housing, tiny houses, they don't have to be big, and they may have different models, right? Which I wouldn't want too many variations because then some people might be walking around, with their noses up in the air. Where you have a 1 bedroom, I have a 3 bedroom. We don't want that, right? You want people to feel comfortable, enough room for you to move around comfortably. But if you're looking for a mansion, this is not the place for you. And services, who mows the lawn, and there would be people coming in, cooks, housekeepers, and all these kind of things. Tiny homes, comfortable living, and then all the rules and general things that the lawyers would be, crafting those documents, your responsibilities, the eventualities, what happens ifs, those kind of things, dispute resolution, all of that, compatibility assessments, criteria, right? And then, so that would be ideal. And like I said, here in Panama, I haven't looked at other countries, but there is a lady I know who lives like in Colombia in the mountains. It would be easy for you to create a little community in a place like that because she says her doctors and everything is really close. So that's something to look at. I had a short live this morning, and this lady says she lives in Honduras in a place called Rotan or whatever. I've never been there. She said she'd been there 31 years. So I'm sure in those areas they may have land that is available to create something like that. Again, that's why you really need like a developer or a business minded someone who can see the value of a growing population of seniors looking to grow old in community. And then the next question I get, some guy will say, "What, Miss Maggie, what about us single guys?" I'm like, "Well, you can start your own group, sir." He's like, "No, we want to be in Maggie's group." It's like, Then we're into the co-ed kind of thing. That's a conversation for whoever's interested to say, "Well, what if I have a friend who wants to spend the night?" I don't have anything to say about that, right? But yeah, you're kind of opening, the door to a lot of complications. This group is for single older women. Now, if you're still looking for a partner, you may not want to join a group like that, okay? Because this is not that kind of group. But I've made an executive decision that I'm not going to ask people their personal stuff, whether you have your boyfriend or whatever. I don't care. But if you're married, this is a group for single women, okay? We're not deviating from that. But definitely we can kind of look at other different situations. But let's see which other countries. Like I said, I'm thinking outside of Miami may not be a bad idea. But then it's not abroad, right? We're not abroad. I've been to Chile, but I don't know that it was a long time ago. If anything like that is available, but I'm sure in the Central America region, there would be possibilities. Now, here in Panama, as I said, I am in the city. I like being in the city. I like the conveniences of everything being available, and it's just doctors and hospital. I like to say I'm going to that store. I'm going to a show. I'm going to this and that. I like the energy, and I never thought I would be a city person. But Panama is not city. I'm not like what the skyscrapers are, even though I'm in a tall building. But it's not that kind of city life. Um, so I like that. In the city, and Mitia, you probably can chime in. San Francisco has some older homes, but I don't know that they have land available for anything like that. Lands are expensive, and developing anything in Panama is a big deal. It's a lot of work, and they have developers who are building more high rises, right? We looked at a couple off of Balboa, but it's not thinking of what I'm looking at, right? And they were super expensive. Those units pre-sales were going for like 200K plus. And I'm thinking, we are older single women. Let's say you sell your home in the state. I don't think it's safe or wise for us to kind of take that chunk of money and buy a piece of real estate. And what if you die in a couple of years? What happens to it? And in a lot of instances, the children on the other side don't want anything to do with anything here. So people have real estate that are sitting here, not selling because somebody got sick, they had to go back, and what happens? So that was a reason why last year or 2 years ago we looked at it and we did the numbers and we're like, it's probably not a safe thing to do. I'd rather rent and then use whatever money to have extra to travel, right? We decided to do that. But in the absence of land in the city, and like I said, that would be like a multi-year, by the time you get the land assessed and get all the permits and this and you're in Panama, remember, nothing moves fast or on time. Time is not something you talk about. So look at it, even if we were to look at, if you were to look at a community outside of the city, there is a little place called Penenome. I love Penenome. I don't know why. The first time I drove through there was something about those turbines, and I'm like, I like this little place. And I saw the mountains, and you're not far from the beach. Me gusta. I like it. And they have a community. I sent a message, and I wanted to go visit the subdivision, but of course I don't drive. So I'd have to hire a driver to go take a look at it. And I'm not ready to buy anything, but I wanted to see the layout is beautiful. It is secured, which is something that's important for people like us. There is a guard gate. You need that. So there is land in that area, lots of land. In fact, they're always posting them. So we could create something over there, but then I'm thinking the developing, and I don't want any of that headache. I don't want to be involved in any of it. So finding someone who can see the vision, it's far-fetched. It's a long shot to find someone to say, listen, you have all these seniors who are interested. Would you consider it an investment? Because, we're going to pay our rent or lease or whatever, right? Because we have disposable income, unless we croak, and then there should be something in the contract about what happens, right? So that is an option. And of course, the subdivision I looked at, they have different models, and I'm like, oh, I don't need a pool and all kind of stuff. I don't need all that, right? So they could do, because my vision was like one road, and then you have the units around that road, and then you have a gate that is guarded, so nobody can just go in and out, right? So there is a level of security. And then the homes, remember I said they would be like duplexes next to each other. And we have the, what do they call that? The community room where we gather, and there's a kitchen, and they have all kinds of things there. It's really well equipped. The gardens that Christine is that Christine who wants to maintain that. But we would have to have like a van or something because we don't drive, so we'd have to have our own driver to take us around. So that could be arranged. It's not a big deal. So it's doable. And Penenome has a brand new hospital, and it's got an old hospital. And I'm pretty sure you'd be able to find a doctor. So now, if you had something that needed specialized treatment, it's a 2 hour ride from the city on a good day. So those are the cons. You got to think about all that. Now, whether you can do that here in this country or whether you're going to do it in another country, that's something to look at. And because I'm a realist, I'm a pragmatist, I'm like, okay, you got to look at where you can make it happen, right? So that's where we are. So that in the future, but what do we have right now? All of us are in high rises. We have one sister in Arahan. We have a sister in Volcan. We can't do anything for those sisters. The sister in Arahan, she's been here for years, so I'm sure she's got a good support system, right? But the majority of us are scattered through different high rises. And we've created what we call clusters. Clusters meaning we have smaller groups of sisters who are close to each other. Like in my building here, it's me, two sisters, four in this building, and then two buildings over is another sister. That's our cluster. Well, we added the sister in Arahan, and then we have another sister who just moved kind of away from the city, close to Merca, in those areas there. So we're not together. We can't just knock on your door and say, "Are you okay?" So, but co-living in an apartment is happening here in Panama. In our group, we have two sisters who are in a co-living apartment situation. The thing to remember is that they knew each other before they moved to Panama. And I think I listened to somebody was interviewing one of them. She said they met in church. They kind of knew each other in church, but they really weren't that close. So don't think that you have to have been friends with someone for a long time to consider co-living. What I think is important is your philosophy of aging, how you feel about a co-living situation. What is your idea of a co-liver? It's not even a partner, it's somebody who's sharing space with you. Then you got to do the accountability assessment. Are we compatible? What time do you get up? What time do you go to bed? Are you a noisy person? Are you a morning person or night person? Because you know what? If you are a night owl like I am, I'm going to bed at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're an early bird, not bird, you go to bed at 8 o'clock. That may not work for you because I may be in the kitchen running the water or doing something. So if you get to a point, you say, "Well, I don't think that's going to work." And it's okay. It's okay. Because the job is not to make your life restrained. You should be free to live your life, your best life right now. So sometimes it's going to take you a while. If you're open to co-living in an apartment structure, then, oh, thank you, Shalare. If you are open to co-living like that, then it's okay for you to kind of do the due diligence and say, "Oh, let's talk to Sheila. Well, Sheila, how do you feel about that? What time do you get up? Or you like what kind of music do you like?" Right? Because like me, I don't have a stereo system. If I'm looking at something, it's on the laptop. But if somebody likes to play music all the time, that would be a problem, right? If I have somebody who's constantly talking, that could be a problem because I'm an introvert, remember? And I would not feel like I have to be in my room. I only sleep in that room. I'm out all day. So if I have to stay in my room because I don't want to disturb you, that's a no bueno. This is where you really would have to take the time to see if your personalities will match. And there is no right or wrong. And what I want to give you, I'm going to be, and I wanted to find that before I came on, but I didn't have time to find like a tool where every person, of course, hopefully it's not more than two in an apartment. It could be more, right? But answer the question and then sit down and say, can this work? If you, this person, that person, and are you telling the truth? Because some people may be in such a rush to get a co person that they don't tell the truth. That's a no bueno. And then once you do the assessment, like I said, it may take you a little while to find the right person. That's why you need to go to the co-living hub and say, I'm looking for this and that. And then if somebody responds, then just start talking off the site. Because at some point, I think maybe we're going to do like a private WhatsApp group, or something like that. Because this is like to the world. But if you do a private group like we have for our SWRA sisters, then it stays with us, right? um Talk about finances, right? How do we divide up the bills? And I think personally that there should be like an agreement, a legal agreement, because you can say, okay, we're gonna rent this apartment together for $2,000. We each fork out $1,000, and then when it comes to a month, you're like, well, you know what? I don't have it. Can you pay it? I would pay. You can't have that. You don't want to go down that rabbit hole. No. So all these things would have to be spelled out. And if you decide to bail out and not pay your bills, what do you do? Do you, what is the word they use? Evict? I don't know how to do that. Those are things, those are the risks you run when you get into those situations, right? So I know we're going to try to look at all possibilities, but sometimes something comes up and you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming, right? What happens if you have family come over? Do they stay in the apartment, or do you put them up in an Airbnb? How do we pay the bill? Do we split it? Because remember, let's say you have someone who is hot blooded and they don't run the AC all the time, and you cold, you don't need it cold, so you're wearing a sweater to accommodate that person. Although in Panama it's easier because every room has a remote thing to turn the AC on. But if that person likes it really cold and she runs it all the time, and then the bill comes and it's $200, but you didn't use that much, but it's split 50-50. Is that fair to you? You see how it can get complicated and muddy? It can. What about cooking? Who cooks? I'm a cook. I don't cook during the week. So what would you be eating? Do we share? Are you open with that? Are you open to that? Or will you be resentful? Well, I cook and she's eating my food. And ooh, it can get ugly. No bueno. So, as much as co living is a possibility, and I remember the sister I'm telling you who's doing some of that. Is it a year or two ago? There was a home somewhere in San Francisco that had like three different areas. She was looking at that then, and they each had their bathroom. There was a kitchen, there was a dining room, there was a living room, and then that place had like two patio seating areas, which was nice because you can kind of spread out. But it was only three people, so that could work, right? If you are in a bad mood or whatever, you could stay in your room or go on the patio and do some stuff. So I wasn't ready at that time to look at that because I need to kind of feel comfortable with all my decisions. I don't make decisions like that. So it wasn't going to work for me because my mind wasn't ready for that yet. But that was a model that could work. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done beforehand to look at that. So ideally, in my mind, the co-housing is the best, bar none. You have your own space, and then we just follow the rules that are developed by the cooperative, right? Yes, there would have to be a contract. I agree. I agree. I remember the interview with the co-living friends. Well, we had two sets of them, and I think after at the end of the video I just posted with co-living, I just put what do you call it, a screenshot of that one of them. It seemed to have worked very well for them. Both sets of ladies that I interviewed. In fact, one set is still in an apartment in my building and beautiful, and the other set was in a house and they just moved to another fancier house and they're still together. So it's been working. Now there might be some other co-living couples, you could call them. Um, Maybe out there in the community that I'm not aware of, right? But I know this is something that a lot of people are looking at right now, especially people whose income may not be, $22,000 to $3,000 a month, are looking for a more affordable option. So in the city, co-living would definitely help with your rent, and not other things. But you do have options in the interior outside of the city to get into much cheaper housing. But again, you're still alone. So if you want to consider co-living outside of the city, then the issues you need to consider is that how remote is it? How safe do you feel where you are? I tell people if you're going to move outside of the city, consider a compound where you have some barriers and some closure where you're not by yourself, that there are other people. So the subdivision I mentioned in Penenome, it's gated, right? So not everybody can just walk in, but that's some security for you. But if you go into David or one of those places that you hear people talk about, where is the house? How isolated are you? Right? And I assume they have some type of alarm system. I haven't looked into that. I know people are putting ring on their doorbell here, but they've had some home invasions. And then you go into a community and they see two older women living in a house by yourselves. I guarantee you, you're going to be a target. They're going to look at you sideways. Oh, okay. So when they go out to the store or whatever, you can come back and everything is gone because the thieves are watching. So that's a challenge. But I would say if you are here in the city or you outside of Panama and considering co-living here, just make sure you make it a long-term project. Don't be in a rush to get it done. Start talking to people now, find people in these communities. And then, because the people who sign on, at the co-living hub, I say like there's 25 of them. So they're interested. So you go in there and under subscribers, you're going to see their names. And then you can put in the chat, also, and I'd like to talk to somebody about, and then start the conversation going. But then keep in mind, it's a long-term project. It's not something you can jump into. Plan on renting on your own for a little bit. Whether you need to be in the city, if it's not affordable, go a little bit outside the city while you still vetting people, all right, if that's what you want. For me, co-living sounds like a good idea, but it's not urgent for me to do it because I like my own space so much. Yep. Financial accountability and responsibility is crucial, yes, and respecting, having boundaries and respecting the boundaries, right? So many factors. Yes, it's not easy. It can get complicated, yes, but remember that, Mitia, that some people have done it and it's working for them. So I would say, one of them wanted to be on that panel last time we did because, we asked a question. It would be a nice thing. But these two who are here, We're kind of casual friends, met in church, saying hello like that. But the other couple, they knew each other. They were friends. They had each other's back, and they were each other's next of kin and emergency contact, right? And I think they have different personalities, but they say, they lit everything out, and everybody knows what everybody needs their space, right? And there's mutual respect. And one thing they mentioned is the trust issue, that they are learning to trust somebody else with their personal information, sharing passwords and stuff like that. You got to get to that level when you're giving somebody your password to anything. And which is something that sometimes can be difficult for women to trust each other, because you might have been burned by someone before. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? Hmm. Maggie, what about the layout of the place? I saw a 2 bedroom and 2 bath condo, one in the front with a bathroom in the master, 1 bedroom in the back with the bathroom outside. Outside. One of the lady couple, they had a house. They had the two spaces. One was upstairs, one was downstairs. That's what would work for me, but it's not an apartment. It's a house, right? So if it's a condo, you know how in some homes in the US they would have 1 bedroom closer to the front, and they have a name for it, and then another group in the back. Yeah. But I'm still thinking it's really close in an apartment. Like I said, sometimes I'm going to the shower and I forget something in the washer and dryer, and I go out in my birthday suit to get it. I might forget. So, you got to think about all that. Are you okay with that? And you kind of really have to like each other and talk it out just like a couple, because you have to build trust. So the layout, if they have, they're not next to each other, that would help. That would help. So if somebody wants to consider it here, and I think that's crucial, the question you asked, that to make sure people can have separate, areas and not be on top of each other. And then the other thing too is like understand that people personalities are different. I may get up in the morning and I'm weighted with worried about stuff. I don't feel like talking. But if you're one of those people like a annoying husband or spouse, you're gonna say, "Are you okay? What's wrong? Are you okay?" Leave me alone. I just need to be myself for a while. So what I'm saying, so all these little things can kind of get under your skin. And somebody has to be grown enough to say, "Oh, she needs her space. It's cool." Doesn't mean anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You say, did I do something? Oh my God. No bueno. Don't do that. We are mature women. Let people live. Let them have their moment. Let them have their day. Right? Um, the kitchen has a half bathroom and is facing the living room. The kitchen has a half bathroom. That's interesting. And a half bathroom near the front. Well, the powder room, we call those, close to the entrance. But any um I think the other thing to think about too, you don't want somebody to have the master and then somebody has like a little room. So it kind of has to be equitable, right? Because you're sharing that space and you're paying about the same money. So you can't feel like one person is like the child and the other one has it. So that's why not every unit would work. And like my house, I remember my house in the States. Now, we have the 3 bedroom in the house, and then there was like a mother-in-law in the courtyard back there. That would work, right? Because people need space. Someone like me, I would need space. So whatever, if I were to consider co-living in an apartment, the layout would have to be good. Otherwise, I don't think I can even consider it. Nope. So that's where we at. Any other questions, guys? So if you know somebody who is a developer and has some millions to spend, Mitya, Send them my way. I'd love to have a coffee and just, just put that little seed in their brain to say, you're a businessman. Here is something for you to consider, right? I saw a building one time in El Cangrejo here, and it was a for sale sign, but it looked like it needed some work, right? And I was like, it was like a 3-story, and I'm like, oh, we can have some sisters. That would be great. But then I started thinking, oh, we got to remodel this thing. And in my mind, I was like, there's no way Maggie can handle that. So hopefully you can hire someone to manage that. But did you hear about the sister who was trying to open an assisted living and she's trusted somebody who ran away with her money? So listen, those are the risks that you run. So if I were to do anything like that, it would have to be with a well-known developer, somebody who I'm not going to have to worry about them running with the money. Because if it's their project, they're putting up their money, right? The only thing I'd have to worry about is the timeline, which I know is going to drag and drag and drag. So you can't be in a rush to get it done. But and then I sent a message to my I have a nephew, godson, he's a financial person, and I know he was investing in all kind of things. I'm like, hey, I found this building. Are you interested in investing something in Panama? He said, why are you asking me? Why don't you buy it yourself? And I'm like, there's no way I have money to buy a 3-story building. Are you crazy? But I went back the other day, and it's like, somebody already snatched it and doing something to it. So I'm sure real estate in the city is not going to last long. There was a little house across from my building on a side street, and I was like, well, it looked like it would be nice, but it's close to Balboa, so I was going to have to pay Balboa prices. And it's like, no, like my apartment here. Most of the people who own apartments in this building are individual investors. A lot of them are like from Colombia, Venezuela, Spain, other places. And a lot of the sisters will say, oh, she has it for sale. They may have it for sale, but that doesn't mean they're going to kick you out, because you're just going to have new um a lend what is that, leaser? Yeah, somebody, somebody who another owner to deal with. But this apartment here, I think they would be listing it at close to 400K. And I'm like, there's no way I would spend that kind of money for an apartment. I mean, if I'm a multimillionaire, that's peanut. Don't get me wrong. If I was a multimillionaire, I would buy this apartment. But right now, for my age and what I have my portfolio, it doesn't work for me. No. And there is nothing wrong with saying not now, maybe not ever. No. And I used to question why old people just, opted to rent versus buying. Now I know why. Now I understand. Go with a rented room. We are not making a partnership. We have the same address with respect. That will work. A rented room. That wouldn't work for me personally, because I need to spread out and I need to have a kitchen that I can work in. So, but it might work for some people. It might work for some people. In the same condo, my roommate has her own privacy. Good. And I have my own. I don't mind getting a small room less clean. And listen, what do you do in a room? You just go there to sleep. I don't see why people, spend a lot of time just, definitely for me, that would be private bathroom. I'm not sharing that with anybody. Private room, private bathroom. The room doesn't have to be big. Like I said, I need like a little patio. I need a place to work. So the bedroom doesn't have to be big, right? But you have to be able to spread out and feel like, you're not. Another thing I spoke about in the other video is that how co-living now is becoming a business for people who used to do what we used to call flippers. They used to flip homes and then resell them, right? So now that the housing market has cooled off, they are looking into co-living, because you may have people, like she mentioned, rent a room, that let's say you just come into town and you just got a job. Yeah, you don't want to be renting a house or whatever. If you can find a place with a nice clean room and a nice bathroom. And then there are other people, and then they have like a kitchen and stuff. It works for some people. It works for kids who are in college. Some people were buying those pre-sales for their kids, when they come when they start college. Some people are transient, they just have a job with an assignment for a short term. It works. So that's why if you were to go right now and Google co-living, that's what's going to come most of the time. People are buying homes, retrofitting them. You can have their own bathroom, own space, and then shared, what they call common areas. Yeah. I don't want to have multiple people where I'm staying. If I'm traveling, yes, but to live, I don't want more than one person in my other space. That wouldn't work for me. If somebody else doesn't mind, remember, sis, there is uh, no judgment. Whatever works for you, if it works with your pocketbook, go for it. Less cleaning. I like that. But in those people the ladies who are co-living, they do have a housekeeper, so they don't have to worry about cleaning. Yeah, no. Yes, Christine, it has been an excellent conversation. Good developer prepared to take on the financial. Yes, that's what I need. That's what I'm looking for. You ladies have any other question? Let's see what time. Oh, 6:16. Yes, been 2 hours. Anything else? I'm going to get the layout and sell if I can send it to you. That would be great. Listen, as long as you feel comfortable and you're not on top of each other and things have been spelled out and understood and agreed to, I say go for it. Because there are two reasons people want to consider co living: isolation and financial. All right? So, oh my God. Good night, Christine. You need to go to sleep. I know she's in the UK. Bless your heart. Thank you for joining. Anything else, ladies? Did I say anything that was helpful? Is there anything else you'd like to find out? I told you where we are. Nothing's written in stone. It's just a goal. Anything else? You guys are good? All right. If I don't see anything else, thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate it. And I'll say au revoir. So let's talk again next. We're going to keep meeting on Saturday. I know Greta was like, I miss your Saturday live. All right, Greta, that was for you, my artist, in-home artist, in-house artist. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. I try to share as much as I can. Why keep information from people? Makes no sense to me. We rise together, we fall together, especially right now. You better hang on to each other. Nothing else to do. Yes, it is posted on the regular site. It says co-living or co-housing or co-living. Which one would work best for you? I mean, I would prefer co-housing, but again, you got to be realistic. Where are you right now and what can work for you? All right. I do have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, but you can't bring anybody into your space. You got to be careful, right? Okay. All right, guys. Have a good night. God bless you. So I'm like, yes, I need to run to the store to find okra. I'm on a hunt for okra. Oh my God. Yes. Okay, guys. I'll see you next week, okay? Or tomorrow. I'm making black-eyed peas and okra salad if I can find the okra. I do have shrimp that I'm going to have to clean tomorrow. But anyway. All righty. Bye. Bye, guys. Thank you. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, Greta. Yes, I got to go to the store. You know, it's 6:20 and I don't like to be out there at night. No bueno. Mm-mm. Bye.